to order. Note the town of Acton, in response to the coronavirus pandemic, is currently following the guidance from the Acton Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC. The town hall is closed to the public. This meeting will be broadcast live via local access cable on the ActonTV channel or streaming online at the ActonTV YouTube live channel, and audio will be broadcast live on the radio on AEM 94.9 FM. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak. Computer and app users may use the quote raise the hand feature to request to speak. David, are there any citizen concerns?
There's one hand up, John.
Okay, please.
Call on user, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Tara. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yep.
What's Acton? So I have a couple comments and actually 2 comments and then a question on the capital projects that are later on. Can I ask them then as opposed to now?
Yeah, you can ask. Yes, we'll be taking questions and comments during that presentation.
Great. Thank you very much.
That's all, John. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we move on to a chair update. I just have one update. I wanted to thank Cheryl Ball and Heather York for the excellent letter sent to the residents dated December 1 on measures each of us can take to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. And in particular, I would like to thank them for the section that they did on isolation and loneliness. John, can we have your update, please?
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that. I would also like to thank Cheryl and Heather for all the work they've done over the last several months, and also all the other staff in town who've been really doing some work different than normal and doing a great job with it. So it's continuing, but everyone is continuing to pitch in and make sacrifices, and I really appreciate that. The rest of my updates, I think, will be covered in the topics later in the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you. So member minutes, starting with Jim.
I don't think I have anything new since a week ago.
Okay. Joan?
All set.
All set. David?
Nothing from me, John, today.
Dean?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at 5 after 7. Let's see if we could just, we have a long agenda later on. On consent items, number 12, approve meeting minutes December 7th, 2020. 14, approve committee appointment, Peggy Hebert, full member, Agricultural Commission, term to expire on June 30, 2023. 14, approve committee appointment, Zachary Talafair, full member, Historic District Commission, term to expire June 30, 2023. Do I have a meeting to approve consent items 12 through 14 inclusive?
So moved.
No, thank you. Second?
Second.
Second, David. David, if you call the roll then.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so it's unanimous.
Okay, we still have 5 minutes. I think we can do the update on the Minuteman School athletic field project. As I mentioned in my chair's update at our December 7th meeting, on November 24th, Dr. Buquillan presented to the FinCom on the Fields project and the necessary $1.9 million in borrowing that was needed. One question came up that was answered satisfactorily. No vote was taken by the committee, and there was no objection made to the $1.9 million in Fields borrowing. We've been advised that member towns need not take any further action regarding the school committees, the Minuteman School Committee's vote in favor of the borrowing. Your board may simply choose to accept the school committee's decision to incur debt for this project. As the way it was explained to us, if we wanted to oppose the borrowing, we would be obligated to call a town meeting and see if the town did not want to incur our share of the borrowing. We did not take a formal vote on this. There was no need to, but we, went around the room and, nobody was opposed to it. So we can leave it as we left it several weeks ago, or if you would like to take a formal vote, let's discuss that now. So let's just leave it as we left. Jim?
No, I'm fine with, I still think it's a great investment, and I don't see a need for a formal vote.
Okay. So thank you. Okay, so we'll leave it at that, and we'll let it stand with no objection. Thank you. We are at 7:09. This hearing's due to start at 7:10. There's a notice that I must read to open up the hearing, so let me just start that now. Town of Acton notice of tax classification hearing. The Board of Selectmen will hold their required annual public hearing on the issue of the tax classification on December 14, 2020 at 7:10 p.m. remotely by video conference and call-in. The Selectmen are required to hold this hearing annually and receive taxpayer comments as to whether the various classes of taxable property shall be taxed at the same rate or whether different tax rates shall be applied to different classes of property. The hearing will include a presentation by the Board of Assessors detailing the options available under Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. Due to the continued closure of Town Hall to the public, the hearing will be held online via Zoom. Login instructions for computer laptops can be found here. From the computer, use the link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. So, John, will you want to introduce the assessors?
Yes, please. Thank you. This is an annual process that the Board of Selectmen goes through, and Brian McMullen, our Chief Assessor and Assistant Finance Director, is going to share his screen and present to you the whole situation, and then walk you through a few motions that the board can consider as it relates to setting the tax rate for this year. So Brian, I hope that you're able to share your screen. Perhaps we have to make you a panelist.
I did that.
Okay, so jump in, Brian.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Selectmen. So as you had mentioned, John, and John, as you had mentioned, tonight's hearing is required under state law in order for us to set the tax rate. This is pretty dry stuff. I'll try to make it exciting as possible. But there are four major options here that need to be considered in setting the tax rate. One primarily is adopting a residential factor. And what that means is, do we have a uniform tax rate as we've had the last 20 somewhat years, or do we shift that tax rate? Do we shift that tax burden from the residential classes to the CIP classes? So let's get into the material. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So just to kind of give you a quick rundown of who the makeup is of the Board of Assessors. So we have Carol Leitner-Shriepnick, she's our chair. Susan Miller, who is been a chair in the past. She's been with us for some time now. And Leo Fochman, who's an alternate, who's recently joined us, and we're certainly happy to have him on the board as well. He's been a great member as well. So let's get into tonight's material. So again, as I had mentioned, this is a required public hearing. Basically, the selectmen have four decisions to make. And those decisions are, we have to adopt a residential factor. So that's going to determine what the tax allocation is, whether it's distributed equally amongst the various classes of property or we shift it. Now, just to mention, the State Department of Revenue has certified our values. You probably have already received notification of that. This was a revaluation year, so a very thorough analysis and detailed analysis of our property values. So we are in compliance. We did receive certification, so our values have been properly classified and determined to meet the minimum requirements on State Department of Revenue. The second would be to whether adopt an open space discount, and then whether to adopt a residential exemption, and whether to adopt a small commercial exemption. So what is tax classification? Again, this is the allocation of the tax levy, and what's the makeup of that? Well, primarily, Acton's makeup is mostly residential. So I think 89% of Acton's tax base is residential properties. The others would be made up of commercial, industrial, and personal property, commonly referred to as the CIP class. So before we get into classification and what it means to select a residential factor and some of the options, I'm just going to give you a brief overview in comparison FY20 to 21, the difference in valuations and kind of the makeup of that by these different classes. So if you look at the very top row, we get a single family residence. Last year's average value was $612,000 and change. This year is $617,000, so about a $5,100 difference, or just under 1% change overall. You look at the average commercial, that went from $984,000 to $996,000, about a 1.2% change. That's primarily due to a couple of major construction projects we had in the commercial sector. And along that same line, the average industrial went from 918 to 950, or a 3.5% increase. Specifically, it was kind of an industrial condo that significantly increased in value over the past year, which is really the reason why that bumped up. This one's interesting. The average personal property account on the very bottom, if you look at that, went from $140,000 to $173,000, 23% increase. This was primarily due to a change that the State Department of Revenue implemented this year in the way we handle and the way we assess public utilities. So in the past, State Department of Revenue used to annually assess those and provide those to the local boards, and then we could accept those or we could challenge them. That's changed now. Now we have to have an independent appraisal reviewing those and appraising those. Those have been accepted by State Department of Revenue. There was a significant increase in them, and that resulted primarily in that significant increase. So again, year-to-year comparison on an average single-family valuation of tax bill. So for FY20, that average valuation was $612,000, with the tax rate of $1,924 resulted in a $11,790 tax bill. The proposed rate this year as a uniform rate was $20.23, with an average value of $617,888, or a $12,500 increase. So the delta being $710 year over year, or about a 6%. So some might ask, how does that compare to the ALG plan? Well, the ALG plan for this year, going into town meeting, we had a proposed increase of about $850 on an average single-family home, or 7.2%. So we can see it's a little less than what we had anticipated. That's primarily due to the fact that the other classes of property absorbed a larger component of the tax levy. So it's just kind of a natural shift, if you would. So moving on to the average commercial industrial, so how does that play out? So again, if you look at last year's FY20 average valuation of $969 with a rate of $19.24 at an average bill of $18,644. This year, that increase went to $985, $271. And again, this is a blend of the commercial industrial with again a uniform tax rate, proposed uniform tax rate of $20.23. The tax bill would result at $19,932, or a $1,288 increase, or 6.9% overall increase. So again, a little more than the average single-family tax bill. So again, we talked about the Selectmen's decision. So tonight you must adopt a residential factor. So that means that you either have a uniform rate and everybody pays the same amount of taxes based on the same value. So if you're a $600,000 home, you pay the same bill as a $600,000 commercial property, or we shift it, and we can shift that to the CIP classes, the commercial, industrial, personal property. Let's take a look at what that really means. So when we shift that, I mean, first off, we have to determine the percentages of the levies borne by each class, just naturally, just how much value do they have, and what is the actual percentage of the levy. Acton, under state law, may shift up to 50% of that tax burden from the residential to the CIP classes. A residential factor of 1 means we don't shift at all. We have a uniform tax rate. And if we adopt a residential factor of something less than 1, that means we're shifting the tax burden from the residents to the CIP classes. So let's kind of look at how the impact would be on a single family home of $617,000. So right now the proposed tax rate is $20.23 in 2023 with an average tax bill of $12,500. So just doing a 5% shift would reduce the residential tax rate from 2023 down to 2010, and their tax bill would be $12,420, or an $80 savings. Then you can go all the way up to 20%, and you see that the annual savings would be $309. So let's look at the average commercial property. So the average commercial value of $996 with no shift, that have an average tax bill of $20,151. Just a 5% shift would increase that tax rate from 2023 to 2124, resulting in a $21,157 tax bill, so $1,000 increase. So just a 5% shift reduces an average residential home by $80, but it adds $1,000 to the commercial. So again, the adoption of a residential factor of 1 means there's no shift. We have a uniform tax rate, and if we do shift it would be, we adopt a factor of less than 1. Historically, we have not shifted Acton's tax rate in 20 plus years. So last year and the years prior, all the way back, I think to 2000 or 1999, we had a uniform tax rate. So Acton's residential factor was 1. Adopting of an open space discount. Well, we don't have any proposed parcels that are classified as open space. We just got the Commissioner of Revenue to certify our values. We have no open space parcels. So adoption of residential exemption. This sounds kind of interesting. So this reduces the taxable value of the principal residence of a property with certain exclusions. So up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential properties can be exempted. So basically what it does is up to 35% of the average residential parcels. This is including everything. This is vacant land, this is condominiums, single-family homes, multi-family homes, so on and so forth. That average is about $511,000. So up to 35% of that, or $179,000, you can reduce anything lower than the average by that, up to that 35%. It basically, it's a shift within the residential classes. So it basically reduces anything less than the average but then it's basically put on top of anything greater than the average. We've never adopted this. It's complicated. It increases the levy on the remaining parcels. It's complex. You'd have to vet out through every single residential parcel that's less than the average, whether it's their principal residence or not. Rental units, and if they have second homes, would have to determine which home is their primary, which is their second home. It's very complicated. It sounds great on the surface, but we believe that it's very complex and that it's really not truly benefiting those because there's no means test here. So it's not, so we don't know that the people that may benefit from this, whether they're really eligible, that we should be receiving that benefit. And then frankly, some of our seniors are living in homes that are higher than the average, so it's unnecessarily burdening them as well. So Acton has never adopted this residential exemption, and nor does staff really recommend that we adopt this. So moving on, the fourth and final option we have is to adopt a small commercial exemption. Again, it sounds good in nature. This reduces the taxable value of eligible businesses up to 10%. The eligible businesses are determined by the Department of Employment and Training. Their value cannot exceed $1 million, and the businesses can't have more than 10 employees on average. So what happens is if an eligible business may be a building in town here somewhere where it's multi-tenants, all those tenants, those businesses have to be eligible. So it's not just one of those, but all of them do. And the benefit really here, we believe it goes to the lessor because you're reducing the taxable value of that property. So it's really not the lessee that's receiving that benefit, and we can't guarantee that the lessee is receiving that benefit. We don't really believe, again, that this is really doing a lot of good, and there's no way of vetting this out to see if the benefit is really going to those eligible businesses. And I can't deviate from the list that we received from the Department of Employment. I have to use that list. So every one of those businesses would have to be vetted out, where they're located on January 1st of any given year, and whether all the businesses located at that facility would fall under that exemption and benefit from it. Then again, this exemption is kind of an internal shift within the CIP class. However, the personal property, does not get this benefit, so they get a separate tax bill. So this is just a shift within basically the commercial and industrial sector. Again, Acton has never adopted a small commercial exemption. It sounds good on paper. We don't believe it's complex, and we don't believe that the lessees ultimately will receive that benefit. So that's kind of the rundown of tonight's hearing. So basically there are four major votes we need to take. Is one, to select a residential factor. The factor of 1 means a uniform tax rate. Anything less than that means that we shift the tax rate. And then whether or not to adopt an open space discount, which there is no open space, so there's nothing to adopt, and whether we adopt a residential exemption and a small commercial exemption. Staff believes that we should adopt a residential factor of 1, resulting in a uniform tax rate of $20.23, the proposed rate, pending DOR approval, and that we do not adopt an open space discount, we do not adopt a residential exemption, and we do not adopt a small commercial exemption.
Thank you, Brian. Questions and comments from board members first? David.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Brian, on that proposed rate of $20.23, that's not casting concrete at this point, is it? Right, that depends on the final budget and levy, doesn't it? Or am I mistaken?
You know, Dave, it's so when we go into this hearing, I do a tax recap, which is the submission I submit to the State Department of Revenue. I've had my rep go through that. There are some things, and one of them, to be quite frank with you, is the state cherry sheets, those are still in flux right now. So there's a potential that could have some impact on this. But right now, it's not necessarily in concrete, but I don't think we're going to deviate from that number, to be honest with you. I think that's pretty solid. So if we go with a uniform rate, I think that is the rate we're going to end up seeing on our tax bills being issued.
Okay.
And I hope
And it's okay to put that in that value in the motion, even though it's not cast in concrete.
You know, I never like putting the rate in the motion. You can. I would prefer to say, you know, in the motion is that, you know, that you adopt a residential factor of 1, resulting in a uniform tax rate. And I think that's the best way to handle that.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
I just wanted to take this occasion, Brian, to thank you, and also to encourage you and John to work out a time, perhaps early in 2021, when you can come back and remind the board and the audience members about the various tax reductions that individual homeowners can apply for. I know we've had an evolution of that over the last couple of years, and it'd be great to make sure everyone understands it. I mean, because when I hear the tax hearings, I hear a lot of these not recommended methods as attempts to reduce the residential tax burden. So I think it would behoove us to help people understand how they can actually effectively reduce their taxes. So I just hope you come back sometime and get us up to date on all that.
Sure. Yeah. No, that would be good, Jim. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Dean? Are there any questions from the audience?
No one has their hand up, John.
Okay, so we have 4 votes to take. The first one is to adopt a residential factor. Do I have a motion to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, resulting in a uniform tax rate of $20.23?
So moved.
Is there, David, Jim?
Just a friendly amendment. I think what we heard from Brian is that he might prefer that we leave the 2023 out of the motion and just say a motion to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, resulting in a uniform tax rate.
Period.
Okay, period. Okay, Joan, do you accept that amendment? Okay.
Yes.
So we would read motion to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, resulting in a uniform tax rate, period. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Jim. Is there any further discussion? So David, if you call the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye, so it's adopted unanimously.
Thank you. So the second vote we have to take is adopt an open space discount. Do I hear a motion not to adopt an open space discount?
So move.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
Second, David. Is there any discussion? Okay, then David, if you call the roll again, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimous as well.
Okay, on the third vote, we have to take adopt a residential exemption. Do I have a motion not to adopt a residential exemption?
So move.
Joan, is there a second?
Second.
Second, David. Is there any further discussion? Then David, again, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, the final vote we have to take is to adopt a small commercial exemption. Do we have a motion not to adopt a small commercial exemption?
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, David. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, then David, please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimous as well.
Okay. So our next item is to discuss an open meeting law complaint from December 8th, 2020, and delegate a response. I would like to begin with this statement as the complaint was addressed to me. On Wednesday evening, December 8th, I received an open meeting law complaint from Stephen Ballard of Boxborough, alleging that the BOS updates I sent to the all boards and committees email shell reporting on the December 7 Board of Selectmen meeting, which was a televised public meeting, was a violation of the open meeting law. The alleged violation was that I voiced an opinion in a non-public forum that included the members of the Board of Selectmen. By way of background, when the pandemic took hold and shut us down last March, I quickly realized the Selectmen needed to communicate its discussions and actions to town boards and committees. The so-called BOS updates were prepared and sent the day after each board meeting to the town's all boards and committees email shell. The distribution list of recipients grew quickly. From comments I continue to receive, the BOS updates have been appreciated by many in town. Ahead of tonight's meeting, I discussed the complaint with Town Council Nina Pickering-Cook and Town Manager John Mangiarotti. Addressing the holding in the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court matter of Bolter versus the Wayland Board of Selectmen, that voicing an opinion in a non-public forum was a violation of the open meeting law, Nina suggested two options. The first was to seek an opinion from the Attorney General's office whether the BOS updates sent out as they are as a public service violated the open meeting law. The second option, in conjunction with Town Manager John Mangiarotti, would be to simultaneously make the BOS updates available to the public by including them within the town manager's weekly COVID updates on the town's website. John is amenable to this approach, and I recommend we proceed on this basis. Please note, in making the BOS updates simultaneously available to the public, my own characterizations, such as the use of adjectives, would not be an open meeting law violation. Thank you, Mr. Ballard, for bringing this matter to my attention. So with that, are there comments from the board?
Is this method okay with Nina?
Yes, that was the second option she proposed.
Oh,
And John was willing to accommodate and incorporate the updates within his weekly COVID updates, so they go out simultaneously sometime on Tuesday, or the day after our meetings.
yeah.
Jim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sure. I'm okay with either way of doing this. I must say that this the complaint led me to go back to the open meeting law materials and to look at decisions that were made and the intent of the law. And my overwhelming impression was that the things that are causing problems with the open meeting law are things that are creating secrecy, and that having you create a quick description of what happens at the Board of Selectmen meeting and sending it out has been a great service. It's been in service of transparency and openness. So I'm all in favor of finding some way for it to continue. The interesting theory that sending something out to everybody on the board, all boards and committees, is somehow a deliberation. It might be worth asking the Attorney General to find out. There was certainly I couldn't find any clear way, one way or the other, of reading it. But I'm not a lawyer, but I'm definitely in favor of finding some way of proceeding. The other point I wanted to make is that in terms of the adjectives you used, my experience has been that you are repeating what you've already said in the open meeting. So you talked in that particular meeting. You know, you thanked the COD and the COA for their thoughtful presentations. So that repeating that in a communication didn't seem to me to advance any deliberation. It was just repeating what's already been said. And that might be a useful guideline going forward, that it's fine to repeat information, thoughts, and deliberation that's already been part of our open meeting. I think that's it. I think finding a way to keep this information flowing is an important thing.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions or comments? So Nina, we would need a motion then to have you, to delegate to you and John a response to Mr. Ballard. Is that correct?
Almost. So the response that I think you need to vote to determine how the board wants to respond to the complaint, and if they want to respond as you suggested, altering your kind of delivery method and audience for your weekly updates or bi-weekly updates. That would be one vote. And then you could, what I would do as a follow-up to that is with every response to the open meeting law complaints, we need to provide a copy and description of that response to the Attorney General's office. So with the guidance from the board, I can prepare that written description of how you are choosing to respond to this complaint.
That's 2 votes you're suggesting.
Yes, it's probably not necessary for the second one, but
If you want it, we'll do it.
we like to be thorough.
Okay. So then would I have a motion then that we instruct town council and the town manager to respond to Mr. Ballard's complaint by stating that we will simultaneously make the BOS updates available to the public by including them within the town manager's weekly COVID updates on the town website.
So moved.
Is there a second?
David, you're muted.
David, you're muted.
Really sorry. I think town council asked just for the second part of your motion first. So just the change in policy of distributing the updates. And then secondly, to ask town council and town manager to do a response.
It can be all in one, however you want to do it, as long as it's clear on the record.
Okay, then that's fine. Need us out.
Okay, did you want to change? Did you want to amend the motion?
No. If town council's happy with that, I'm also happy. So
okay. Okay. And I'm Jim.
Just one question. I'm wondering if we're constraining the town manager too much by requiring that this be part of the weekly COVID update. I mean, for example, at some point, I really pray that someday there will not be a weekly COVID update. So I wonder if we just want to instruct the town manager to, make sure it's that these updates are released, on the town's website.
Well, that was the discussion we had today. It would be easier to include it within his, COVID updates than posting it separately, or just.
Yeah, I think any way he wants to release it is okay by me.
Okay.
I don't want to require it be part of a COVID update.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Please.
I don't think the intent is that it necessarily will be included in all of John's COVID updates. If he has urgent information he needs to get out, that's going to go out regardless of whether there's been a Board of Selectmen update that Mr. Benson has provided. It is just in order to satisfy what is now known as the Bolter rule, which is if you're going to disseminate documents or information outside of a public meeting, you can do that if opinions are expressed, but as that needs to be done it needs to be made available to the public simultaneous with your distribution to other board members. So we were just concerned that Mr. Benson's email shell that he was sending it to, while admittedly very broad at this point, perhaps did not include, wasn't available to all members of the public. So, but with John Mangiarotti sending this out, the intent is that the members of the public have this updated description from the chair at the same time.
Okay, so do I have someone who would move this motion?
I moved it.
Oh, you moved it. Okay, so is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, David. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so David, if you call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay, and then there would be a second motion. Would someone move?
I think we're all together now, right? We did it in one motion.
Did we say that the response would be sent by that town council's response would be sent to the Attorney General? Did we include that? We did. Okay, then that's fine. Okay, we're done. Thank you for your support. Then our next agenda item would be to discuss 2021 CPC project priorities. Would this be Dean?
Yes, thank you. So we got the list from the town manager at our last meeting regarding what I call town-sponsored CPA requests last week. And everybody had a little chance to read through them. And what I would like to see is if I could get any sense from the board as to what you would consider to be the highest priorities of the projects. And then I will transmit that to the CPA committee at our next meeting.
Sure. Comments from board members?
Yeah, I would like to see the funding for the dog park on Main Street.
Okay. Other comments? There were comments last week, and we didn't know how much in funds would be available. It would be north of $1 million, hopefully closer to $1.5 million. Dean had mentioned that we typically fund open space with about $400,000, and that there would be a request from the Acton Housing Authority for $500,000 towards the Main Street senior affordable and disabled housing development. So are people online with those two requests? Because that would eat up a considerable portion of this year's CPA funding. Jim?
Last year, the CPC actually, the CPC decided to reduce the open space set-aside contribution because of being in a situation where, you know, we were oversubscribed with requests. So if the CPC decides to do that, I'm totally comfortable with them deliberating on that and making a recommendation to town meeting on that.
Okay. Are there any other comments from board members? David?
So, the recreation has quite a few requests. What's more important to me is the things that we already have in progress. The changes at Jones Field, the pavilions at NARA, that kind of thing. I think I would put at a lower tier the Gardner playground, mainly because that's a huge number this year, and we could only be fractionally funded, and it's starting something new. And I'd rather see us finish the recreational projects we've got underway rather than start something new and consider starting that new the following year.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Dean, do you have enough to go back with?
Yeah, thank you for the guidance. I'll relay that. I know there has been some movement. I've seen some recent emails from the recreation director to CPC clarifying a couple of these items. And actually, Melissa put her own sort of priority on it, which fits nicely with what Mr. Martin has suggested. So I will relay all that information and I'll update the board.
Thank you. Okay. Then item 7 is COVID-19 response updates. John, please.
Thank you. This is just a weekly check-in on where we are with response activities. We're currently, in the month of December, we've actually seen 80 new cases in town. So that the total number of cases that we've seen are 423 as of yesterday. And there are currently 65 people that are in isolation, meaning that they're currently having it and dealing with it. So again, that's a pretty alarming increase in the last 2 weeks. It was somewhat anticipated, but it's still very upsetting to see. So we're continuing to do what we can to try to mitigate any further increases. Signage has been out. That letter went to every household, so hopefully people had a chance to read through that. And if there's any questions, please contact the hotline or my office or the health office, and we can help anyone understand that. The Board of Health is actually meeting right now, talking about everything that they usually talk about, including COVID. And I don't suspect any specific actions coming out of that, but we'll wait and see how the discussion goes. The state did roll back to an earlier phase and has announced some further restrictions on how we're operating in the community. And Cheryl Ball has done a nice job in communicating all those changes to our businesses. And we continue to push masks and everything else with our residents. Vaccines, we've had some interesting news about vaccines over the last few weeks, and we're still trying to fully understand what our role will be in that. And I think that's probably what the Board of Health is also talking about tonight. But we are set up when the time is right to help distribute as needed. But it's too early to know what our role exactly will be in that. So in the meantime, everybody continue to do what you're supposed to be doing in terms of social distancing and masks, and we'll continue to try to keep ourselves safe. Thank you for bringing your mask tonight, Joan.
Just being extra careful.
That's good.
Okay. Item 8 is discuss cancellation of July 4th celebration. John, again? So
it's only December, but the 4th of July celebration is a very big deal here in Acton, and we didn't have it in 2020 because of the pandemic. As we approach the 2021 summer, a lot of situations are still very much unknown. As I mentioned, the vaccine is on its way, but we don't know where we'll be as a community or a region at that point. And this event, as you know, is not just a community event, it's a regional event, which attracts thousands and thousands of people from the greater Acton area. And we're very concerned about where we'll be at that time. So I'm not asking the board to support me tonight in canceling it. I'm just letting you know that it's not looking like we're going to be moving forward with the ceremony at this point, but we're not ready to cancel it either. One of the biggest things that I think is hard for us as an organization is that we rely on local businesses to support the event. And again, it's not a good year for us to ask our local businesses to help us because we're trying to help them. So that's one factor that's kind of upside down with this year's celebration. And there are several others. So I just wanted to kind of let the board know now, in case there was anyone that wanted to investigate it further with me or have any further dialogue. But just to kind of give everybody a heads up, that's what we're thinking.
Thank you. Then item 9 is discuss the 2021 restaurant liquor license fee waiver. John, again, please.
Thank you. Every year, we annually renew the licensed establishments' liquor licenses. Some are all alcohol and some are just beer and wine, and there's a different fee structure for each. You'll recall over the summer, the board voted to reduce the previous year's fees by 25% as a way to support establishments that actually had to close and couldn't serve at all. We're now at the renewal stage, and many of the restaurants are faced with the exact same situation. Some we've heard from recently are actually, I think they call it in hibernation, so they're not even open at all. So we expect that the way that they fund these licenses is through their sales, and since they're not having sales, we understand it's a hardship. So what we're proposing to do is to move forward with the renewals right now, which we're supposed to do by the end of the year, but that we, instead of having the businesses pay us at the renewal period, we're recommending that we have them instead pay us in 2 installments. The first would be January 30th, and the second would be May 30th. And what that does is it gives the businesses who are in a situation right now some space and some breathing room and some time and some cash flow ability. And we're also recommending that the board consider reducing the total amount owed by 25%.
So 2 quick questions before we begin. This is on the liquor licenses are on a calendar year basis. Is that right?
Yes.
And the bills for the 2021 year would go out now?
Yeah, I believe Lisa usually requires them to be paid before she reissues the license.
And that would
So we
be,
would only, and it would be right now, yeah, right about now.
so they pay by the end of 2020.
Yes.
Okay, and we're pushing it off. That's till January 30th and May 30th. The liquor license fee, it's $5,000.
It's $5,000 for all alcohol, and I believe it's $2,000 for beer and wine.
$2,000 for beer and wine. And these fees are just for restaurants only, not package stores.
Correct.
Okay. Questions from board members and comments before we go take citizen comments. David.
I asked this question last time, but I think I'll reiterate it. For the businesses that are in hibernation or the clubs that are not serving at all, does it make sense to have a more drastic cut, right? I mean, if they essentially have zero income, should we cut it more, or are we assuming that maybe by mid-year, like more things would be opening up and maybe they could have some income halfway through the calendar year?
That's certainly something that the board can discuss and consider. My approach in presenting the recommendation was, first of all, to give the restaurants more time, which I think they would need, and also to reduce the total amount owed. But a third thing that our proposal does is it allows the board to further consider any measures that it wants to take to provide relief later this spring. For example, if we find that, I don't even want to say it out loud, but if we find that things are still not better in May, the board can then consider further actions at that time.
Thank you. Other questions and comments from Jim?
In terms of the cash flow, seems like it might be good to front load that 25% reduction to the January 30th payment. So that then either the remainder would be due on May 30th, or we would decide to make some kind of further reductions at that point. Is that consistent with what you're thinking, John? Is it a okay change to consider?
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't want to try to do the math, calculate it out loud, but basically, we would take the amount due and split it up into 2 installments, and reduce the total amount due by 25%, and take that off the first installment.
Great.
So it's
So the
confusing.
25% would come off the first of the reduced, would be off the first installment.
That's how I proposed it. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Further questions and comments? Let's hear from citizens, because I know we got quite a few letters, and we invited restaurant owners to join us this evening. So David, you have anybody ready to speak?
No one with their hand up, John.
Okay. So can we, David?
I move that for 2021 liquor licenses, we allow businesses to pay in 2 installments, one in January, one in May, and reduce the overall cost by 25%.
Second,
Okay. Does that include applying the reduction to the full amount of the reduction to the January payment?
Well, I didn't state that in the motion, but that's what the town manager said his intent was.
Okay. So, and there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, being none, let's go vote. David, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Okay. Well, thank you. Item 10 is board to consider the approval of Adopt a Tree program. John, please.
Thank you. For this item, I'd like to introduce Public Works Director Corey York, and I'm going to share my screen with a very brief presentation that we've prepared. Hopefully you're seeing the one I want to show you. Is that on the screen, the vegetation management?
Yes,
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
Corey, are you with me?
Yep, he's there.
Okay, so Director York has done a lot of work in this area of vegetation management, and he's been picking up a lot of speed with the tree warden, our new tree warden, Ryan Hunt, and together they've developed some pretty interesting ideas for how to handle vegetation and trees in our community, and we'd like to present a new program tonight, and Corey will walk us through what he's proposing.
Great.
Oh, you're on mute.
Do you have a local mute, Corey? You're actually not muted in
Oh,
Zoom.
just unplug that mic, I guess. Oh, there you are. There you are.
That was working earlier, Murphy's Law. So thank you. As we've been talking about, we have several different public outreach programs that we've been trying to do in the DPW. On our next slide, we have a couple programs that the prior board had approved in relation to an Adopt a Street program and an adopted visibility site. So this gives residents and neighborhood groups a chance to get out and kind of beautify the roads or garden areas, things like that. So it's been well received by a few groups that we've had working in these, working along Main Street. There's somebody that's been working on Polk Road and Strawberry Hill Road. So it's gone well. I mean, they've picked up quite a bit of trash, and it's much appreciated, just helping cleaning up the town. So as we're trying to build upon these kind of programs, on our next slide, we have a couple others that the tree warden has been working on. And so the first one is the Historic Streetscape Program. That was a project that was approved through the CPA. he was able to acquire some funding to focus some plantings within the local historic district. So he's been looking around the areas trying to find suitable locations, and we're currently working with the HDC and the COA to put out information on their newsletters, so we can kind of get the public involved and come in with their ideas of places they might think are appropriate. So just to help us, give us more eyes out there and find good places. So in addition to that, another program we were looking at sort of throughout town is this Adopt a Tree program. It'd be a new program, similar, focusing, trying to find places along roadways and public land. There is some provisions that we can go within 20 feet of the edge of the road with the landlord's permission. So it was just another way where people know their neighborhoods really well. They might see something that we didn't and suggest an idea that they're willing to work with us on. He has worked with other abutters throughout town in planting trees. So this was one way we wanted to try to just publicize that and see if we can get some good information out there. If it was approved, one of the part of the agreement is the person would agree to help water the tree that first year, which is really crucial to get the roots going, and it would just help us to find more locations and get more trees planted up there. So we wanted to come before you tonight and just ask if you'd approve this one for us.
Okay. Is there a discussion from board members, please? Comments, questions?
Who would pay for the tree? The town or the person suggesting it?
This would be through the town. We have some funds that that have come in through other programs, whether it's been a contribution from a developer. The town itself we do planting trees throughout town on various projects. So it'd be in that program. It would just give us the ability to, if a homeowner or somebody had an idea of a good location that worked, and the tree warden deemed it to be a suitable location, that we would plant the tree and the homeowner would agree to do the watering for us that first year.
Other questions? Jim?
So I heartily approved the Adopt a Street program last year, and one of the things that I've learned since then is that there's some people for whom the use of the word adopt in this situation is fraught with some difficulty. Adoption should be something that's permanent, that's lasting into the future. It's not something you can, turn around and, take your adopted kid and put them back. So with that sensitivity in mind, I'm wondering if for the new program, we can use a different word such as sponsor a tree, and maybe even consider changing the name of the old program, although we have lovely signs up, so I wouldn't want to incur the cost of replacing the signs. This is new territory for me. I'm not myself adopted, but I've been learning about adoption from other people and about sometimes the negative reaction people in adopted families have when they see these programs called adoptions.
Further comments?
Yeah, I would just like to thank Corey and Ryan, especially for putting this together. I think it's a great idea. And it's certainly critical to, get as many eyes as possible out there and finding these locations. That's always been a stumbling block in the past, is we might have some money for some trees. We don't necessarily have good spots in mind. So the people in the neighborhood certainly are in the know, and they can work with the tree warden about finding the right tree for the right spot. As far as Jim's comment, whether it's adopt a tree or sponsor a tree, I don't have any strong feelings, although in the industry, this adopt a tree is kind of accepted nomenclature.
So, Dean, would you have a motion for us that to support the Adopt a Tree program?
Yes, I would move that the Board of Selectmen express their approval and support of the tree planting programs proposed by the Department of Public Works and the tree warden, including the continuation of the Historic Streetscape program and the Adopt a Tree program, or other names for the program as necessary.
Second,
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
excuse me, Ms. Gardner,
aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's unanimous.
Okay, very good. So, our last agenda item will be somewhat lengthy. It's going to be a updated presentation on current public works and infrastructure projects, and I believe John has it broken down into 3 parts. And at the end of each part, we will take citizen comment and questions. John?
Thank you. So this is our December update of capital projects. Since I started here, there's been some concern and desire to have a more regular update on what is happening with all the projects that get approved at town meeting every year. And this is an effort to help with that concern. So before I get to what we've been doing with the capitals that's been approved, I wanted to give the board a preview of work that we started over the last few months. Work that I'm very excited about, work that I think is pretty innovative. I think many communities have really nice 5-year capital improvement plans, but not too many have a 10-year plan. And so we, after the board adopted the community compact best practice related to financial planning, we were able to secure a grant from the state for $25,000. And using that funding, we hired the Collins Center at UMass to help us with conducting a needs assessment. And we've just completed that. And we're now working on preparing a report and recommendations along with an investment strategy. And we're also going to be creating a template for annual scorecard, I'm calling it, for capital project updates. So in other words, taking this presentation I'm giving you tonight and making it much better next year, and then having that as a template going forward. And so the purpose or the plan is to present this 10-year plan to you when I make my budget presentation, which will most likely be the first week of March, but we're still finalizing the timeline on those things. So, and just to give you a further preview, the results of the needs assessment found that there are $68 million worth of capital needs in the organization over the next 10 years. That's represented through 123 project requests. And this pie chart may not be that informative, but I thought it was colorful and wanted to share it. It does show sort of the breakdown of the project types over the 10-year period. You can see a lot of them are infrastructure related, facility related, equipment, we buy a lot of big trucks, and over 10 years, we're gonna have to replace quite a few of them. The number 68 million sounds scary, but if you actually look at our capital plan last year that we submitted along with the FY21 recommended budget that you can find on page 148 of the town manager's recommended budget last year, the total at that point was over 50 million for a 5-year capital plan. There was some pretty big things in there, like the fire station and a proposed sewer project, but still, that type of funding is something that we regularly see, and what we do is we refine it and come up with recommendations to just request what is actually needed and prioritize in a way that we think town meeting can support, and that's more to come on that. So as the chair mentioned, tonight's updates will be 4 categories, and after each category, we'll stop for the board or others to ask any questions, and I will jump right into it. So we're going to cover 4 facilities. The first is the North Acton Fire Station. If you drove by today, you'll see that they started putting up the structural steel Over the last few weeks, they poured the foundation and slab. Some of the radiant heating is installed, and they're moving along pretty nicely. We got some weather coming this week, which will slow them down a little bit, but I think we built weather delays into the schedule since we were doing a project this time of year anyway. So I'm optimistic that we'll stay on schedule, and we'll be celebrating a new fire station at the end of next year. The feasibility study, last year it was approved for a feasibility study to look at the Public Works building and then the adjacent facilities such as the transfer station and all the other accessory buildings there, to make sure that what we're doing out there is using the facilities the best way we can, and then to look at if we wanted to have a more modern facility, what can we do? Can we renovate what we have? Can we put an addition on it, or do we have to start over? And so as part of that process, we hired a consultant to do stakeholder interviews, which have been completed. They're doing a space needs analysis, which is something that was done within the last 10 years. So it's something that we're updating based on what the organization looks like now and where we're going as an organization. And that work will be completed later this winter. And then we'll start looking at conceptual site plans, and the report on the feasibility should be finished by midwinter. So we look forward to sharing those results with you at that time, and to talk about what the next steps are for this project. The image is messed up here, and my apologies, but that is supposed to be an image of the property that the town bought last year at 19 and 21 Maple Street, the property that Gordon Richards formerly owned. And we're currently doing a feasibility study. The property was acquired for parking. And so we know parking is something that we want to do with the parcel, but we also want to understand how to best use that site for parking and what other uses we can leverage with that building that's there and its location right next to the T. And so we've had a consultant look at some options. There was a public forum in November. They're doing a survey that I believe has closed, and we're analyzing those results, coming up with some site concept ideas. We'll have a second public meeting in February, and then using this data gathering process and that second public meeting, we'll then have a final report and presentation to share with the board in March. Finally, for building updates, Asa Parlin House, right behind Town Hall. This is something that we received CPA funding to do selective demolition. We also received an earmark through the state budget, thanks to our local legislators. And we used that funding to remove the back portion of the building that was severely deteriorated. And then we've come up with some design concepts for what to do with the building going forward. The designs were presented to the public on November 12th. There was a pretty good dialogue that night from people that were in attendance. We've received some very valuable feedback from many people in the community since that night. There is an active survey open for anyone else that wants to provide their input. And what we're hoping to do is come up with a preferred concept and then do the design work on that this year, and then seek additional funding to figure out how to implement that project. The good news is that because of the state earmark, we still have almost $100,000 left in the CPC appropriation, which helps relieve some pressure from having us need to go back to them for now for any additional funding. But it is something that we think is a very exciting opportunity to create an amenity to our town hall and library complex right here in the center of the historic downtown of Acton.
Well, it looks so much better, John, now, just as it is.
Well,
Thank
we're
you.
not done. We're not,
No,
we're
I
not
know,
done.
but thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So those were the building updates. So I can pause here if there's any comments or questions from the board.
Anyone hand up?
I have a hand up.
Yes, David, I'm sorry.
No problem. So I was wondering what the process is to make the final concept decision on the Asa Parlin house and the Maple Street property. Is that something the board will do at a future meeting?
Yes, so what I'd like to do is, well, I'll start with Asa Parlin. So we have this public information gathering that we're doing. Carl Packard, our designer, has taken the feedback from the public and also the Historic District Commission and others, and we're going to come up with our preferred alternative, which is the design that we think is the best, and we're going to ask the board to support that preferred alternative. And then if it's a go, we'll move forward on the next phase of design. So yes, it'll come to the Board of Selectmen again. I would say probably in the spring. And then for the 19, the same answer for Maple Street, the Gordon Richards building. The design work that we're doing there, we would after we finish the public input process and analyze what we think is the preferred alternative for what to do, we would present that to the board. And if the board supports it, we'll continue moving forward. If the board does not support it, we will look at some of the other alternatives.
Can I just ask a follow-up, John?
Sure, please.
So yeah, I've listened to the feedback on the Asa Parlin house, and I understand that a lot of people would like to reduce the building to its original, the original structure for historic reasons, and I completely understand that, but I'm concerned that we'll end up with a building that's too small to have a very useful purpose. And so I just have in the concept chosen, I just have a concern that, you know, we want to have something that, you know, has a good use as well as has an attractive outcome.
Yes, I think that's a great comment. I think just to bring the board back up to with just a reminder on the concepts. One concept is to entirely remove the addition that's shown in the upper right-hand corner. But the other two options are to, one, leave it the way it is, or two, actually reduce it in scope and size by bringing the roof line down to one level. There's different cost factors that come into those decisions, but those two options that keep a portion of this 1970s edition certainly would provide more space for indoor programming, while the third option is focused on creating more outdoor space for programming and use that we don't really have right now in the center complex. So those are all considerations that we'll be bringing forward.
Thank you.
Further comments from Jim?
Yeah, a couple questions. First of all, it's great to see this, and I'm just very happy with the notion that you're going to use this as an ever-improving template for bringing everyone up to date on the state of capital projects. So you mentioned the long-term capital plan. I know we're going to hear more about that later, but I just wanted to make sure or verify that part of that scope of that plan still includes looking at how we make transitions away from fossil fuel in our buildings.
Thanks for that clarifying question. So that project that you're referring to is actually separate. This is a financial project focused on the financial process of developing a capital improvement plan. That building study that we have yet to begin is to look at actual facility needs and what the actual facilities needs are over the next 25 to 30 years, and how we can adapt sustainability best practices into how we're evaluating those needs. That project is partially on hold because we have a lot going on, but also partially on hold because I'd like the sustainability director to be involved when we get them on board in the year 2021, which is fast approaching.
Can't come quick enough. Thank you. I mean, the year 2021 as well as the building study. Let's see. In terms of the scope of the transfer station redesign, are we looking to change the sort of the user experience of the transfer station? I've had some emails about people who just find it distressing that they drop their little bags there, and then very very large trucks move their little bags 70, 80 feet to put them in the trucks. And I would love to see a way of just being able to just drop their bags into the truck beds, or some way that would be less energy intensive. Is that part of the scope to consider that?
Yes. Yes. So in addition to looking at the facility needs, it's also looking at the operational needs and the operational programmatic needs. The group that we hired, Weston and Sampson, they have a whole unit that specializes in transfer stations and construction and operation of transfer stations, and they're involved, and they're looking at everything from how we circulate people to how we move refuse and recycling. So yes, there will be several things that we look at, including people have mentioned alternative ways to do things, and those will all be considered as we finalize our recommendation.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I haven't looked at the details of the survey about the Gordon Richards site that's now next to the train station, but we did get some emails that seemed to indicate that there were concerns that the questions were focused on commuter needs more than resident needs. And I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that if you had any thoughts about that.
Thank you. Yes, the parcel, as you all know, was acquired for the purpose of parking, using our parking funds. And the debt service that is being incurred to acquire that property is being paid off by parking fees. So it's a parking heavy acquisition. But that being said, the building there is very solid. The former owner was a concrete forms builder, and he used his tricks to build a beautiful concrete foundation on that building. So it's very sturdy. So we think that there are other uses that we could try to employ for that building. And this study is to look at both how to maximize the parking for the commuter rail, how to maximize the access for pedestrians and cyclists, and how to reuse the facilities that are on the built property. In addition to the building I mentioned, there's also a couple sort of structures and a lean-to and a older garage, and we're looking at those in varying scenarios and whether it's in our best interest to keep all of those. But that's sort of where we're looking at with this process.
Thank you. That's really helpful to hear. Last comment was, just in case you haven't, I just wanted to recommend having a sign between the Asa Parlin house and where people park, that just had the actual link to the survey on it, so that people that aren't tuned into getting emails or checking the website would have a place where they would see, oh, I could actually express an opinion on what happens with that interesting looking house over there.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions from board members? Dean?
Yeah, I'd just like to amplify what the manager said about the investigation and the transfer station and the operational issues. The Weston and Sampson reached out to me because of my background and proximity to that building for many years, and they were very interested in the operational issues and looking at the feasibility of, we're going to continue moving the trash from one spot to another with a front end loader, or have it go directly into a compactor. One of the problems with that is if you make the decision to go with compactors, you pretty much eliminated any other possibilities in the future because of the structural changes you need to make to the building. So they're certainly investigating that. And they were talking quite a bit about, what can be done to improve the customer experience when it comes to the recycling area as well, which is remarkably better than it was 15 or 20 years ago. So certainly they're taking some real hard looks at that, and so I think you'll you're certainly being heard on that as far as what can be done to, not drive around a diesel-powered front-end loader from one side of the building to the other all day long, which is probably pretty boring work for the guy running the machine too. The other point, again, regarding the Gordon Richards property, the Maple Street, I just want to confirm again what the manager said. There was a 2/3 vote at town meeting to purchase that property and to finance it for and by parking. So, that's what certainly we should be respectful for the neighborhood, and certainly want to make sure that we minimize the impact on them and see what innovative things can be done with that building. But town meeting spoke and they put their money where their mouth was. I think folks are a little freaked out by this pandemic, and they think that parking is never going to come back and people are never going to take the train again. But those things are going to change in the years to come. And I think of all of the meetings that I attended and listened to with the huge demand for more parking facilities in South Acton, certainly my priority would be to make sure that there's good parking facilities for Acton residents over out-of-towners. But in the past, I was sort of a voice crying in the wilderness because everybody else said, gee, we should provide this regional facility and help out our neighbors. So there's trade-offs to be made there, but certainly my expectation is that the only way we can pay the bill on this, and what we asserted to town meeting, was that the parking revenue would pay for the purchase of the property, and I expect to see that carried through.
Further comments from board members?
Just one more quick
David,
comment.
sure.
On the Maple Street property, just to reinforce what both Mr. Charter and Mr. Snyder Grant said, if we hadn't purchased the property for parking, Mr. Richards would have sold it for a 40B. In fact, the offer he had for a 40B was for more money than he sold it to the town. And it probably would have had over 30 parking spaces to support the residents in the 40B. So it's not that there wouldn't have been any cars there either.
Thank you, David. Can we open it up at this point to John? I'm sorry.
So I just, on the study of the DPW site, is there any possibility of coming in from Forest Road instead of having to go onto Route 2 and back out onto Route 2? Some of my lady friends don't like going around on Route 2 in and out, and would like to come in through Forest Road.
We're certainly going to look at how people access the site. There are several ways to get to the transfer station, and we're going to look at security and what makes the most sense. And I do understand that coming off Route 2 creates challenges, and we'll try to make that entrance as safe as possible as part of the process.
Okay, any further questions from the board? David, are there any citizens with hands up to question or comment?
No one has their hand up, John.
Okay, so thank you. So John, would you move on to the next group of projects? Pete.
Our next topic is complete streets and traffic calming. And for that, I'd like to bring Director York to the stage. Corey, you're up.
All right. Yeah. So talking about our complete streets and traffic calming, it's on our next slide. It just kind of demonstrates that it's kind of a holistic approach of looking at our infrastructure and trying to improve sort of the experience for everyone, whether you're walking, biking, driving a car, providing spaces for those different modes of transport, but also streetscape items, whether it's a planting strip, benches, kind of all those things that just makes it a better experience trying to get around town and a little bit more accessible for everybody. So starting out in the program, as you look at the next slide, we listed some projects we're going to talk about further down in our presentation tonight relative to different projects on Main Street. visit the Route 2 project at Piper and Taylor and the High Street Road Safety Audit. But this is just kind of highlighting some projects as we're looking at sort of multimodal improvements. These are some of them that we're looking at. In addition to these, on the next slide, we listed some other projects that are just ongoing. We've done some road safety audits on Hayward Road and Strawberry Hill Road. We continue to look at the recommendations and the strategies that were recommended in there and trying to implement some of those suggestions and or working on some designs to kind of continue to advance that effort that we did and continue to make these roads in a better position. It mentioned the Maple Street between Main Street down to the Stowe Street section. As part of the rail trail project and the train station, we had implemented some bicycle accommodations on that. And we'll be re-looking at that holistically when we get into looking at sort of the outcome of what will come from the Maple Street and Richards projects and our design for a sidewalk on Stowe Street. So we wanted to re-look at that. There's been some questions related to the bike lane and parking. So we'll be coming back to look at, discuss some of that some more. And then some other projects that are just coming down the pipeline, like West Acton Center. For the last few years, we've been getting some local groups that have been really looking at the area, having some ideas. So it's been kind of an idea of just looking at the vision of West Acton Center and the infrastructure, coming up with a vision of what the roadways and could look like with some new amenities, whether we're talking bike accommodations, whether we're talking benches, additional landscaping. So just coming up with sort of an overarching master plan of what we think would be the vision for improvements, and then we can kind of work away at the different elements of design and implementation. So on our next slide, as we kind of move from that, we're also continuing to work on sidewalks. You'll see this is a list of sidewalks. We have the priority numbers. These were the priorities that were set by the former sidewalk committee. Those duties have now been tasked with the transportation advisory, but so we kind of worked down this list of priorities, starting from number one, working down. We're probably actively working on about 2/3 of these right now. They're in some form of phase, whether it's in conceptual design, whether we're finished or working with neighbors, trying to talk with them about impacts in front of their home and whether or not we need an easement and what we can do to sort of make it work for everybody. It's everyone. It's a win-win. So we're continuing to work on all these, whether in the Great Road, we're working with MassDOT, trying to get these tools in place. And so it's just an ongoing kind of fluid project where we're constantly talking with the butters and trying to resolve any issues and just keep these moving. On the next slide, we talking about a road safety audit that we're starting underway now is on High Street. It's kind of taking a holistic look at High Street and the intersections, and we'll be looking at developing, getting the feedback from the public, compiling existing information that we have out there, and just finding a way to recommendations that we can improve upon the street and just make it better, make it safer, try to slow vehicle speeds down. We've done some work on the High and Parker intersection, but something this we'll probably be discussing, looking at a multi-way stop again, as we've looked at in the past, but it may be something that we look at again to see if it's meeting the warrants to happen. So we've just started underway. We've been collecting information. We're going to have a sort of a preliminary discussion in preparation for a public forum, so we can get feedback from everybody that live on the street, to drive it every day, and just get as much as we can and get a good sort of set of recommendations that we can then bring back before you and start working on those. And kind of the last piece of our Complete Street program we're just touching upon is the train whistle ban. That, you know, we have a pre-ruled whistle ban that we had the ban going prior to the Federal Railroad Administration's rules in place. So we've been able to retain that and part of the pre-rule conditions is every 3 years, we have to recertify that we're in good standing with our whistle ban. So we go through that process of looking at traffic conditions, accident data, the physical crossings themselves, gates, and you kind of put all that into a formula and kind of calculate our risk threshold for it. So unfortunately, in 2017, we exceeded the threshold that we were no longer in compliance. So we've been working with a consultant that focuses on railroad crossings and coming up with some ideas of how we can make improvements along our corridor to get ourselves back in good standing so we don't lose the whistle ban. One of the ideas that we've been looking at is similar to West Acton would be sort of a center island channelization so that you couldn't cross and get around the gates. But we're sort of in discussion phase right now. What we're going to do is sort of develop those ideas a little bit. We're looking at the 2 Central Street crossings and Parker Street. So we want to look at those and talk to the neighbors right there because it is there will be potential impacts to some of the driveways that are right close to the railroad. So we're just giving you an update, but we're sort of working towards that, and we'll be talking with the abutters and again going through that process. And that's pretty much all our slides for the complete streets. So we can open it up.
No questions comments from board members. David?
Yes, Martin Street was not highlighted on the railroad crossing list. Is that because no changes are being anticipated there?
Yeah, we look at the corridor as a whole, and what the consultant's been doing is we don't have to necessarily improve upon all of the crossings, but we have to work on enough improvements that gets our threshold back up. So it gets a little bit difficult if you drive because Martin Street's so narrow if we started doing channelization. So we were kind of focusing on those other 3 right now, looking at the possibility of improvements at those locations. So.
Okay, and just a suggestion for the Stowe Street sidewalk. I would love to see the Stowe Street sidewalk be a bike path spur, so kind of a double wide bike path. So families coming from the bike path could take this spur to Jones Field. We have to that sidewalk or bike path has to cross the brook, and so probably a culvert needs to be put in and things like that. I just like it to be wide enough along its whole route to be able to accommodate 2-way bicycles.
Sure. Yeah, we have a sort of a sidewalk design right now. We are evaluating whether or not like a shared use path could make its way down. And like as you say, once we get to Fort Farm Brook, we need to get across the river. So we have a structural engineer that we've been talking to, sort of evaluating the benefits of a pedestrian crossing or improvements to the Stowe Street Bridge itself. So looking at the sort of the most cost-effective approach of what makes sense there. So we'll be evaluating all that as we sort of get ready for sort of a shovel-ready project there.
Great.
Okay, any other questions on this section from board members? David, is there anyone with hands up?
Jim has his hand up.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
And then 2 people have their hands up.
Yeah, Jim first. I'm sorry, Jim.
Oh, sorry, no problem. So I just wanted to expand on a comment that David made about occasionally for some of these sidewalks to also accommodate bicycles. We have some narrow streets where we're not going to be able to have the ideal sidewalk, bike lanes, road kind of layout with the appropriate buffers. And I know that our sidewalk design guidelines were written, before the complete streets policy. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on what of these sidewalks, how do we go about thinking about which sidewalks might need to be thought of as combined bicycle and pedestrian ways?
Yeah, it gets tricky on some of these streets that we've built. We're in the case of High Street, we've had to negotiate easements with every landowner going down the road. So it gets difficult even to get the sidewalk in. Like say, it's not ideal for bicyclists because sometimes we're maneuvering around a tree, trying to preserve a tree if possible. Other times there may be a wall or something that we're jogging in and out. So, but there's definitely opportunities to look at that kind of an option. I mean, it could almost envision if we ever get to connecting West Acton to Kelly's Corner, say, it's possible that might be a feasible place to have a shaded use path. I think there was some discussion briefly at the recent Powder Mill Forum as far as kind of a shared path on that as well. So I think there's definitely opportunities, and every sidewalk or every project we work at, it's almost like you're starting over because it's a whole different set of constraints for each project that sends us in different directions to kind of find a way that works.
Yeah, I think comment on that is that we don't yet have a sort of a comprehensive bike plan, sort of understanding what parts of town we're trying to connect with what other parts of town, and that the lack of that makes some of this planning kind of hard. So I look forward to a day when we can actually look at that aspect of long range planning as well.
Sure. Yeah, what we do is we worked with MAPC years back in their GIS system. They sort of took different data layers, whether it was destinations, neighborhoods, sort of commercial areas, and they made kind of a map that generated a bike utility demand. So kind of ranked different routes. It's kind of what we use as a guide as we're looking at different parts of town and different projects. So I'm sure there's always ways to improve upon it, but it was kind of a first pass approach that the MAPC kind of did to kind of look at the town and sort of rank different types of streets of where a need or demand would be.
Great. Is that a document that's already out on DocuShare or available?
I believe so, but I can find the link. Yeah,
that'd be great. Thanks so much. My last question is just, what's a bike boulevard? That's on the slide that you're showing here. I wasn't sure what that was.
There's all different. Yeah, I can't say that I'm particularly an expert on these, but a lot of these are shared lanes. I think when you're getting into the low speeds, I can't speak exactly to what a boulevard is, but we get into like the bike sharrows where you're sharing lanes. Yeah, I can't say exactly. I've run into a situation where it's come up that it's been a feasible approach. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, I'll read up on it. One more question came up, which was maybe because I thought this is what a bike boulevard was, but I think I'm wrong. In talking with MAPC, it seems like there's a place for on the lower speed roads that don't have center lines to have bike lanes, but with no center line. It places the priority of the bicyclists who are more vulnerable sort of up at the top, and then cars can use those bike lanes if they need to, if their cars are coming in different directions. But it creates a narrower lane for the cars, which also tends to slow the traffic down. So I just wanted to discourage us from unnecessarily striping the middle lines of roads if we can avoid it.
Sure.
Thanks. That was it.
Thanks.
Any further questions from board members? David, I think you said there were several.
Yeah, a couple people. Just one second.
Sure.
Mike Majors, please go ahead. Mike, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, there was, no, I really don't have a question, sorry.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how that happened.
Oh, no problem. Colin User, please go ahead.
You thought I had a question at the second meeting.
Hello, it's Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure.
Oh, good. Thank you very much, Corey. I I thank you for preserving the trees. I marvel at the High Street project. It really is a work of art. Each time a section gets created, I'm just so excited. I am not a fan of more traffic lights. There's more and more evidence that these cause speed instead. I agree with Jim on reducing the center lines for various reasons to just be not as car centric. In Acton Center, it seemed like it was very well received by the DRB, and I was stumbling with my phone and didn't get on in time, but I'm hoping that you're not planning any yellow curbing. I don't like yellow curbing, especially in the historic districts. So that's, I guess, one question.
Yeah, in the Acton Center, we don't have there's no painted.
We haven't done the presentation yet on the on the
Oh, sorry. Okay, what about Prospect and Hayward? I just joined.
We haven't done the intersections yet.
Okay, can I ask about then whistle ban? So I asked you this, Corey, probably a year ago, and the question then was, and still is, are we likely to be able to avoid the whistles? Because I've heard a bunch of whistles in the late night recently, and wondering, is it because we're on notice? Is it because it was just an accident? I'm not a fan of the center islands, especially inside the district, but if I have to have an island, I'd rather have an island than a whistle ban. So that's one question. And then the other question for the whistle ban, and I guess I'll call in and talk about Prospect and Hayward later, but hopefully. And what is the neighbor issue? Why are they involved in whistle ban?
I'm not sure exactly why the train was blowing. Even with the whistle ban, the train still has the right to blow if there's something happening on the tracks. So it's possible there was somebody on the tracks or a vehicle or something. Or maybe they were working. They also will go home and work. I'm not familiar with that. The reason why we're involving the neighbors is we're doing some of this, looking at different options at different crossings. There's potential impacts with the direct abutters, their driveways, Acton. So we just want to include them. Yeah.
Further citizen comments?
That's all, John.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the intersections presentation.
Yes, thank you. Corey?
All right. Yeah, so we start in the intersections. We have some of the projects on Main Street that we wanted to talk about, give you an update. So starting with Acton Center, as everyone knows, we went through sort of the original study back in 2016. We were able to acquire a consensus on the design to move forward. On our next slide, we have sort of the layout of what the new layout looks like. So we acquired some design funds in 2018, and we hired a company. So we just recently did a 25% design forum in October and held a virtual forum and talked to the public about it. So as you look at the concept here, it sort of redesignates space and does a little bit of a widening on the town hall side to create space for bike lanes. It does a little bit of shifting of Concord Road, but essentially Concord Road becomes a one-way, so at Newtown Road, it's one way in, and then on the other side of the common, it's a one-way out, and we realigned the entrance on the Main Street, so it comes in more of a 90-degree. It's opposite Town Hall, so it gives you better sight lines looking out. That's where you can take a left or a right onto Main Street. We met with the HDC last week and talked to them about sort of material types for the crosswalks and curbing and all that, and got their feedback and information and what they're looking at. We also talked to them because we're realigning the Concord Road in front of Town Hall. It causes a conflict with the horse trough. So we talked to the HDC about that and ideas for relocating it. So we got some good feedback from them, and the consultant's going to be incorporating that into the as they work now, progressing beyond 25% through 100% design. So we anticipate getting the designs moving forward and having final design by this summer is what we see the projected timeline for this. On our next intersection that we're working on is Main and Prospect Street. So we did a intersection study on this back in 2018. In 2019, we came up with a final report recommendations to the board. The next slide, you'll see a series of concepts that were discussed at the public forum to unsignalized the traffic signal and the concept for a roundabout. At the Board of Selectmen meeting last winter, it was selected to move forward with concept one. So we have a consultant that went out and surveyed it, started working on the concept, putting that concept to design. We got to a 25% design phase and held a forum in November. We got some good feedback from the people that attended, some ideas and questions about sort of in this scenario. If you look at the next slide, you'll see sort of the different modes of way you can kind of move through there. So there were some questions about the loss of some of the turning movements and things like that. So sort of at the end of this grouping of slides, be looking probably to ask direction of the board on how they want to move forward as we start looking at ideas for this concept that was approved. And then the last intersection that we're starting to look at, the Board of Selectmen goal, was at Main and Hayward. We did an intersection study back in 2008 and implemented some reconfiguration of the roadways. It continues to be an area of concern for traffic coming in and out, especially with schools, buses, and the kids coming out, and the parents. So it was an interest to sort of take another look at it and see what we can do to make improvements here. So we're looking at that right now. We're in the preliminary phase, just kind of going through that study and looking at ideas of how we can make this safer. So we've contacted Harts just to follow up with them and the size of trucks. A lot of times they have a fairly large tractor trailer coming through here. So we wanted to make sure we understood what they have regularly coming in and out. And we'll be working on that, coming back to you with some ideas on that. That's the discussion that we had on the intersection, so we can open up to questions.
Sure. Dean.
Thank you. Corey, if we could go back to the design you have for the Acton Center
Sure.
layout. Okay, right there, as I see it, Woodbury Lane, is there an issue with the notation you've got here that Woodbury Lane is supposed to be a left turn? Shouldn't that be a right turn?
Yes, yeah, I used the wrong one. So it's a right turn only there.
Okay.
What that does is because of the proximity to people coming out of Concord Road, you don't have that oncoming. So that would be my mistake there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that certainly makes a lot of sense. Of putting in a right turn there, and I know there's in the past there've been lots of accidents there with the conflict. People think that they're safe when they get past Newtown Road, and then they don't realize there's a car stopped trying to turn down Woodbury Lane.
Yes.
I'd be interested in hearing how your conversation went with the HDC about moving the horse trough. Does that look like a viable option?
Yeah, we looked at a couple different locations of where to put it, and it really the preference that they were looking at was sort of where the road is, where Concord Road is now coming out. We're removing that, making that green space. They kind of thought putting it over in that area, so it's in its own little area. We'll obviously keep it back so they're not blocking sight lines, but they thought it'd be kind of a nice spot that puts it by itself and kind of holds the common for the main monument. So.
Okay, good. And I think, I attended several of the meetings about the Prospect Street intersection. That's just a very frustrating situation there because there don't seem to be a lot of really great options. And it's something that I think has reduced town engineers to tears since probably the 1950s.
Yeah, it is a very unique intersection, and that location, like I said, we advanced the concept that was approved. There was some feedback about sort of the prohibition of some of the turning movements there and flows. So there was a discussion of maybe sort of having the consultant we hired them to take that concept of approved and get it to through design. There was some questions whether or not we sort of take a step back a little bit, and kind of look at the analysis that got us to this point. They have kind of a fresh set of eyes. If they see something that maybe might be an improvement, that might be a compromise between some of the concerns that were raised, and how we make that space just safer all around.
And the last point is regarding the Hayward Road and Main Street intersection. Certainly that seems to me to be a very high priority, just because of school bus traffic and the substantial traffic jams with school buses, and obviously the Hearts traffic. That really seems like it's something that really begs a solution fairly quickly, especially as schools start to go back into normal session and you get more school bus traffic. And because now you've got all the parents that don't want their kids on the school buses, so they're all driving down there, dropping the kids off. It's really gotten to be quite a severe situation. So hopefully this one stays sort of front and center.
Sure. Yeah.
That's it for me.
David?
Yes, thank you for all the work on these. I think the Acton Center design is really good, and to me that's the most important intersection. It's the one I hear about the most. Hayward Road, I would in my mind is second importance. To me, this intersection calls for a signal. I think with the long vehicles coming in and out of there, school buses and trucks, and students crossing there, and student traffic out there, I think that's a really strong candidate for a signal. And the Prospect intersection, and I may have some fault here. I asked about some turning movements, and when that was presented to the board, and either I misstated my question or misunderstood the answer. I thought it was possible when that was presented to be able to go from Prospect southbound to Main Street southbound. In that one, Corey, if you could put up that one, I would, there are a number of possibilities. I would like to see that the angled exit off of Main Street replaced with the possibility of doing a left turn from the one-way section to be able to exit Main Street turning right. I don't know if that makes sense here. I can't point at things and whatever. Anyway, I think this design could be modified. If it can't be, we might have to back up. I don't think it's acceptable to take all the Prospect Street southbound traffic and dump it onto Central Street during rush hour. So I think that's not a workable situation. People would never be able to take the left turn at the end of Central Street. There's too much traffic there at rush hour. Those are my comments.
Jim, I can't see you, but you have your hand up?
Sure, I do have a couple of questions. When I was at the Acton Center design report out, there was some confusion about whether Woodbury Lane was two-way or one-way. And is that clear now?
Woodbury Lane is two-way still, but when you're turning out onto Main Street, it's a right turn only.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, that's what we had thought, but it wasn't clear back then. Okay, good. Let's see what else. Just a couple of comments on Hayward and Main. First of all, the signalized crosswalk is a godsend. I particularly use it when I'm coming up Hayward Road on my bicycle, and instead of having to, hang out with all those cars that are busily trying to figure out how to zoom out and go left and right, I can just get on the sidewalk, hit the button, and wait for a nice, safe crossing on the walkway. I think I'm so glad it's there. The other comment I had about this intersection was that the couple of times when I've been there during, sort of the school rush hour, let's call it, the police have done an amazing job. They're always there at those rush hours at regulating the traffic so there's not too much of a backup on Hayward or on Main. And I think that probably for the foreseeable, my guess is that for the foreseeable future, a police presence there can act more intelligently and flexibly than a traffic light until we get super intelligent traffic lights, which I fear. The last comment, no, that's it. That's it. Thank you for all this work.
Joan?
No, I lived on Woodbury Lane, so I'm very familiar with that intersection. And the Haas Trough, the garden club plants that, so it would be nice to maintain it on that little triangle.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal is to move that kind of and preserve it, so.
Any further comments from board members? David, do we have anyone from the audience who wishes to comment?
Yeah, there are two people.
Sure. Please.
Barry Rosen, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, David. I just want to make a comment about the Hayward and Main intersection. I do agree with David, not quite with Jim, and that, yes, during the school rush hour, the police are controlling the intersection. I've been through there many times. However, it is costing us money when the police are doing that because they're not doing their regular job. They're sitting there for almost 20 minutes and controlling an intersection that a machine can do really well. Smart traffic lights are here. I've driven a great deal of areas, especially in the southern US, where they've got some very smart traffic lights. It does require road sensors, and most of them have artificial vision, but it's cheaper than having the police waste their time there. I do believe that intersection does need, I guess you call it signalization. Other than school time, school rush hour, I guess we called it, I have been there during the quote unquote evening rush hours, trying to get through that intersection, both on Hayward and on Main. And on Hayward, I had a heck of a time trying to make a safe left turn. And when I had been on Main, it was only because I and other drivers decided to stop that people could safely get out of Hayward. So I think that intersection, to me, is a fairly high priority for safety reasons and to at least alleviate some of the complaints that I know we've been hearing from residents that just say traffic in Acton is getting to be a pain. Thank you very much, gentlemen, people.
Thank you, Barry.
Tara, please go ahead. Tara?
Hello, it's Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I disagree with Barry. It doesn't happen often, but here I am disagreeing with Barry. I love the flashing lights. I think it's walker centric. I feel like you put a green light in there and it's going to create yet another racetrack. And have we talked about Prospect yet? Yes, you have. So on Prospect, I was worried about the new design. The one that you showed, Corey, at the at the forum didn't have the, oh, it's like an acute angle going south, Main Street traveling south onto Prospect going south. Is that correct? That's a new ad after the forum? Hello?
That was in the forum.
That was in the forum. Okay. So I was hoping that you could lessen that, the acuteness of that angle, and make it more stark, because when you changed it on Concord Road, that made everybody slow down, and it made it much more safer as far as I was concerned. So that was something I was wanting to say. Still no traffic at light at Prospect, correct?
That's correct. Right now, it's we're not looking at a
Great.
signalization here.
Thank you.
As David mentioned, we talked a little bit after the forum, and some comments came up, so we were discussing whether or not we have the consultant kind of take another look at this and see if they have a fresh set of eyes. They see it sort of a better way, maybe to modify this to sort of still enhance the safety, but maybe allow some more turning movements or flow if possible. So.
That sounds great. And before you go any further, if you feel like looking at the idea of a traffic light at Hayward, please have a neighborhood forum, because that's who's going to have to breathe the fumes from people sitting at a traffic light. And the parents should know, because that's, their kids will be walking around in what could be, people speed through these lights because it's green, it's yellow, let's go. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara.
And one more, John.
Sure, please.
Alyssa Nickel, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Alyssa Nickel. I am on School Street, and keep this Prospect Main diagram up, because I believe that what David Martin said, I am agreeing with. If so, very, very strongly. I would object to the southbound traffic on Prospect Street no longer having access to Main Street. Because I live off of Main Street on School Street, when I'm coming from any other part of town, West Acton, North Acton, I find it much safer to go down Prospect Street to get onto Main Street, because I can, instead of going straight from Prospect by the gas station onto Main Street, I continue down and go in past that little triangle, and then I'm at a right angle with Main Street, and that feels much safer for me than were I to go down Central Street, because the angle is so extreme at the intersection of Central and Main Street. You have to be on the crosswalk or even past it in order to see southbound traffic on Main Street. So I would really love to see the ability to get from Prospect into that little section, which I can't point to be able to turn right on Main Street rather than going down Prospect to Central. So I see your cursor. If you move it over to the left, a little bit further. So I'm not sure that was clear, but I would really love to be able to continue to use that small section past the triangle and be able to turn right onto Main Street, where the red arrow facing down is.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look like I'll be able to do that unless I'm going north on Prospect Street.
Yes, that's what that was my feedback as well.
Okay, so I am in very strong agreement with you, David. Thanks.
Thank you, Alyssa.
That's all, John.
Okay, so the final portion of the presentation will be on other project updates. Corey, please.
So, thank you. Just, so as Corey mentioned, with this Prospect Street project, we had taken direction of the board and presented a 25% design. Based on what we've heard tonight and what we heard a little bit after the last forum, we're actually kind of going to dial back a little bit to 25, back to 20, and relook at this a little bit. Just want to make sure the board's comfortable with that.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here, where are we going? So other project updates. So I just wanted to run through a couple other things just to keep the board apprised of what's happening. The River Street property, 53 River Street, was acquired by the town a few years ago. With it came a dam that we found out is on the list for the state that considers it a hazard dam. And as a result, we were required to either A, repair it entirely and fix it up perfectly, or work towards removing it. And we've started on the path towards removal. We've received some grants from the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. We received over $100,000 in grants from them to help with that effort. And we have a designer on board. We are planning a presentation on this project to the Board of Selectmen a week from tonight. And so I was gonna just leave most of the work on this for that, but I wanted to mention that this is ongoing and work is underway. The Sports Pavilion project, there was a ribbon cutting that we held for the bathroom building. We've since finished the exterior of the building next to it, which will be used to support activities at Narra Park. This is an exciting project that received a lot of community support and also an earmark from our state delegation to help support CPC funding that was approved, or CPA funding that was approved by town meeting. There is work that remains to fit out the interior of these buildings, but I'm very happy to have the exterior looking like this instead of what it's looked like for the last however many years. And we have some functional space that we can use as we continue to sort out how we'll fund the rest of the interior work. So that's a great update there. I think they look sharp, and the bathrooms are going to serve the Miracle Field very well. And so it's an exciting community project over there. Jones Field is another exciting project. This is a entirely accessible playground. If you look at the picture, that's a merry-go-round. If you remember a merry-go-round, they used to be a lot more dangerous than this, but this is one that's designed for anybody to use. If you have a wheelchair, you can access this merry-go-round. Anybody can use it, and it's really cool. There's a lot of other nice features like this at Jones Field, and the rec team did a nice job putting this together with some community support. And now we're working on sort of the rest of the landscaping and site work around the playground, including a accessible path to get through it. And so that's a nice project. Gardner Field, we talked about a little bit earlier tonight. This is something that's been a lot of community support, neighborhood support. Some local businesses in West Acton see this Gardner Field as a key to some of their economic development efforts. And so they've started some of their own private fundraising and partnered with our rec team to do a feasibility study using some CPA funds. And they've come up with an idea for how to improve the parking and provide more people to access this facility, and also open it up to better visibility to the public. And they're pursuing funding for the playground, a new playground there as well. So that's something that I think you'll see as a CPC request, and I think there'll be some other efforts to fundraise there as well. I just wanted to bring the board up to speed on that. And finally, the board about a few months ago approved an Eagle Scout to build a pump track, and that work is underway. It may even be complete by now. I know they were working on it over the last few weeks, and this update is a few weeks old, but that's a cool project that I'll certainly bring you a picture when we see people with their bikes out there to see the finished result. And I believe that was it. So those are our capital project updates, and we appreciate you listening and any input or comments that you have.
And Corey, thank you for all the very, very good work. So,
Can I just ask a quick question?
Please.
For that Gardner Field layout that you had, is that part of a design, or is that just a concept that someone put together?
So Lemon Brook is a landscape architecture firm that we hired with the funding, and I believe this is one of the conceptual layouts that they've come up with for the site.
And is there anything to address the lower part of that property, the drainage issues there? Or have we not gotten that far?
No, I think that would come in the full design, where they would address issues like that.
Okay, thank you.
Jim?
I remember hearing one notion a while ago, which was to underneath the Gardner field have a shared leach field for the and a septic system for all those businesses that are now don't have a sewer or won't have one for a really long time. And I wondered whether that was at all a realistic notion that was worth pursuing, and if so, how that would potentially impact this design process.
I don't believe that idea has been discussed with this group. It's an interesting concept. I don't know that I've heard it before.
Okay, well, I pass it on in case it's
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that would be an interesting funding opportunity.
Okay, well, that would conclude our agenda items for this evening. We will be meeting up on Thursday. John, do you have any updates on the powder mill visit by the Lieutenant Governor?
No. Other than that, we're expecting 10 inches of snow as part of a nor'easter.
Okay.
That's my only update.
That'll bring her to town. Yeah, okay. So we're meeting again next Monday night. The executive session that was mistakenly put on for tonight is on for next week. So we'll begin at 6 with a purpose 6 executive session on 348 to 364 Main Street. And we will have the Steve Anderson farewell, and alumni are coming back to participate in that. So if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. David, you call the roll, please?
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so it's unanimous.
Okay.
Thank
Have a
you.
good week. See you next Monday night.
Aye.
Good. Bye now.
Hello, everybody.